Hello and welcome to another video tutorial with Marklinofsweden. Today we're going to make white water. What is white water? Well, that is that kind of high-speed water stream which crashes into a lot of rocks and things like that and gets all air-filled, bubbly and, simply white. Typically for this type of water is that it has a high-gloss, transparent surface, but within, in the core of the water, you can see the air bubbles and things like that.
I have since earlier just painted the location of the water to check that it fits. This needs to be sanded a bit so it's not so glossy and we get a better tack with the stuff like the rocks and the new water surface. I use a piece of paper which I fold and cut until it fits the location. This will be representing the stone walls I will have here. And when done, it looks like this. Now let's put these pieces of paper onto the styrofoam. This is a 16mm styrofoam. I just draw a line along the edge of the papers and then we're ready to cut it. I do cut this with a razor sharp knife, like this, and here are the styrofoam pieces. Now, to get some good surface onto this, which is kind of realistic stone wall surface, I sand it a bit with a kind of rough sandpaper. Then we're ready for the engraving. I make the engraving using a knife. The stones I'm engraving here is 6mm tall and 9mm wide. The individual stones can be engraved using a sharpened screwdriver, or in this case I've just folded a piece of 1mm aluminum together. So it's kind of convenient to do the engraving with. I also cut away some of the pieces here to make the wall look a bit torn and old. But this is optional depending on what kind of look you want. If you want it even more old and kind of ancient, then cut deeper and separate the stones slightly. Now it's time for the basic painting. I use burnt umber, black and white. I mix this with a bit of plaster. This is a medium rough sand plaster used for plastering walls before redecorating. So, and I mix this to a kind of grayish tone. The purpose with the burnt umber is to avoid getting that bluish gray. I want a kind of a bit warmer gray. So this is what it looks like. Now it's time for the detailing. I use that with a red acrylic color and more burnt umber. This is dry brushed onto the wall in spots or on the individual stones. The brown color is also dry brushed in the same way. Time for the wash. Now I use a bit of green, mainly black and brown, and a lot of water. The purpose with the wash is the opposite to a normal wash. This is actually to put dirt. What you do want and what the desired thing is with this is to have the wash to stay in the joints and kind of highlighting every cracks and crevices in the wall. I applied 2 layers of wash. I let them dry in between. When the wash is properly dry, I dry brush on white color on top. This purpose with this is to highlight the surface structure, but also give some chalk remains on the wall surface. Then it's time to glue on some moss. I use wood glue, PVA-B glue, and coarse turf, light green from Woodland Scenic. I apply the glue along the cracks and the joints in between the stones in the wall, and then I powder on or stick on the moss, and this is what it looks like. Now it's time to glue the walls in place on the sides of the water. Now, the fit between the wall and the mountain will not be perfect. It needs plastering. I use toilet paper and thinned PVA B-glue, wood glue, for this purpose. So I pour some glue into a container, mix it with like a 50-50 mix with water, and then I soak the tissues of toilet paper into that, and then I push it into the cracks using a brush like this. And this is what it looks like when all of the cracks has been filled with the toilet paper.
Okay, so far so good. Now we need some nice looking rocks which the water can crush into. Best way to make rock sides, I think, is to make molds. There are some really nice molds available in the shop. I use the ones from Woodland Scenic, but it doesn't matter. But it should be molded rock, I think. If you're not very handy with your knife, then you can cut it from styrofoam. It will work just fine as well. I'm going for the molds. Let's go.
I use a lightweight hydrocal plaster from Woodland Scenic. I pour some into a container, mix it with the right amount of water, and then pour it into pieces of the molds which looks interesting and right for this water stream. I also flatten it a bit before I let it to dry. This is to avoid too much sanding before applying it to the wall. After a few hours, they're ready to be removed from the mold. I now give these rock pieces a bit of grey paint. This is a thinned acrylic grey paint, blended from black, white and some burnt umber. This is what it looks like when the grey paint is in place. Then I fix these to the wall with a glue gun. Now there will be a certain amount of cracks also around these rock pieces, so I fill those with the same type of plaster, meaning toilet paper tissues soaked in PVA glue and water. The wet tissues can also be shaped into rock pieces if desired.
Alright, so far so good. Now it's time to make that water surface. The upper part, which is the stream coming to the edge, and the landing pond or landing base where the water will land eventually and be all white and foamy. So let's start off with that.
I start by applying a 50-50 mix of water and PVA glue onto the surface where I will have my water. Then I add first one layer of tissue of toilet paper on top of that. Push that into the water glue mix and then add some more water glue mix on top of that so it gets really wet and soaked. Since I only will make minor irregularities like waves in the water surface, I only apply 2 layers of toilet paper in this location. I also repeat this process for the lower dam, the landing base for the water. As soon as everything has dried, I now paint the rocks and the filling I made with a plaster, the toilet paper plaster with a rock color, so it kind of blends in. The water surfaces is painted using green, brown, grey, white and black. And I start by using almost only white and black and some green in the edge. I do not thin the colors at this point, so they're kind of thick. I add more green and also some black into the very deepest area. Lastly, I just dab clean tap water and blur the edges between the different shades in the water surface. And we're done. Here's what it looks like when done. Once dry, I apply a black wash onto the rock sides to get some contrast and structure in those. The black paint will only stay in the crevices and the cracks, highlighting the cracks. I do the same with a white acrylic paint, but I dry brush this with a kind of stiff brush. This is again to highlight the contour, the surface structure of the wall. Now we got all of the layers of paint in place. Now all of the paintwork looks at this point matte and kind of dull. A wet surface should be blank or high gloss, so let's add some high gloss coat to this area, both to the water but also onto the rock side. I use a water-based high gloss varnish. You can use any high gloss varnish, just try it on the other colors so it doesn't react and get bubbly and ugly, and you should be ready to go with that. The moss should also be wet next to the waterfall, so I also apply some varnish on top of the moss. Once the varnish has dried, I apply a layer of PVA glue on top of the water surfaces only. The purpose with this layer is to smoothen out the water surfaces, so you get kind of a more flowing look on the surface, but also to add some depth. Now wait until the glue has dried completely and add another layer of that high gloss varnish, that clear coat.
Alright, so now let's go for those white water streams. They're made from Noch water effect or similar product, mixed with fibers. There are different fibers you can use. This is fiber for aquariums. This is a filter type fiber. This one is good. It's almost the same as what you find in the pillows. This is an IKEA pillow for €2.50, which is what? $3. It's the same type of fibers, really. Look the same. Almost same as my dog, actually. The aquarium fibers are a bit stiffer, so they're a bit harder to work with for the white water. I prefer the pillow ones. They are a bit softer. Now note that the pillow must not be an old one that you are throwing away, because then the fibers do not look like this. The fibers are all messed up by all the washing and things like that, and not usable for any waterfalls. One pillow is good for 2,000 waterfalls, so it's more than what you need. Let's get started.
I squeeze out thin streaks of this Noch water effect onto a food wrapper type foil. I make sure to make the streaks really thin towards the edges and a bit thicker in the middle. With the streaks in place, I now apply the fibers into the water effect. I kind of push it into the goo with a brush like this, and it's also necessary to put more water effect on top, so you get that kind of transparent glossy look we are desiring for this. Now I was thinking that to have the first two falls not so turbulent and not using the white fibers, but the kind of method I used in the previous waterfall video, whereas I dab arrow-shaped white acrylic paint into the water effect instead. Now the two styles of water effect didn't blend very well in the same area, so I needed to go back and cover also those with fiber and get that fiber white water look over the entire area. At this point I also thought that there were too many exposed fibers, especially on the top of the fall, making them look too foamy. So what I want to do is to add more water effect on top of the falls until they crash into the first rock side, and from there it looks okay the way it was.
So, that's one way to make a whitewater effect for your diorama, modular railroad, or even a miniature terrain for like Warhammer and things like that. If you liked the video, please help me by giving it a thumbs up. If you want to get a notification once next video goes live, please subscribe to this channel and you will get an email notification when that happens. And until then, see ya!